Hello everyone, welcome to the Superintendent Spotlight. Very excited today to bring to you a topic that is of a lot of interest to parents and a topic that I'm often asked questions about, and that's our social learning curriculum and the social and emotional support programs that we have in place for our students and our families. So I have three expert guests with me today, and I'll introduce them, and then they will tell you a lot about what's happening with respect to social learning in the Hingham Public Schools. So to my left is Heather Rodriguez, and Heather is the Director of Counseling for the Hingham Public Schools. She has responsibility for supervising the secondary guidance counselors or school counselors that are in each of the middle school and the high school, and as well she oversees the program that involves our adjustment counselors. And we are very fortunate in Hingham to have once again an adjustment counselor in every building. We've lost those for a time when our economic times were tough, and at the elementary level we were sharing, and at the middle school level we were using only a part-time counselor, but now we have full-time counselors in each of the elementary schools. And I'll ask in the second segment a little bit about what a difference that makes, because I know it makes a huge difference, both to the folks doing the work and as well to the parents and families that we serve. So we also have Jessica Hogue, and Jessica is new to Hingham this year. She is an adjustment counselor at the Foster Elementary School, so she's one of the new folks that we hired this year. And next to Jessica is Catherine Ryan. Catherine is an adjustment counselor at East, finally, but for the past 5 years since East has opened, she has done double duty at both East School and at South School. So I'm going to turn it over to Heather, who's going to give some kind of introductory comments about the program and the role of the counselors.
Sure. So in Hingham, we're very fortunate to have a very sizable and substantial counseling staff. We do have adjustment counselors K through 12, one in each building full-time, which is excellent. We've brought that back after a number of years, like you mentioned, where they were not full-time.
Right.
And now we also have 3 school counselors, one with each grade at the middle school level, and at the high school level we have 6 school counselors, myself having a smaller caseload, as well as an adjustment counselor. So throughout the district we do have a comprehensive counseling curriculum for social emotional needs, and that's a really great program that we're able to teach some students some skills, and then with different abilities that we have to kind of intervene if it is necessary. So we kind of think of it in a 3-tier model, much like some families may be familiar with the reading intervention or response to intervention model. So the first tier would be general prevention and general skill building for our students. And so adjustment counselors go into classrooms and teach some lessons and have exposure with every single student pretty much in the building. And then the second tier is some maybe shorter term targeted intervention for students who have the skills but maybe need a little bit more support and work on that. And then we do have tier 3 for us would be more very targeted intervention or crisis type of work when something arises. So that's throughout the district.
Okay, that's great. Jessica and Catherine have done some taping showing us what their day is like on a day-to-day basis, obviously respecting confidentiality, but while they're talking, the audience is going to be seeing some of the things that you've taped, so we'd be interested in hearing from you exactly what you chose to focus on and what the audience will be seeing in those clips. So who wants to start?
I can start. So I think that sometimes when we think about social emotional issues, people can think, well, my child doesn't have any emotional problems, so they don't need any kind of counseling. But we really view it as part of a comprehensive education for the kids. And so the first stuff that we taped were interventions that set a level of expectation about what the behavior is for the whole building. And so that involves the whole staff. There are programs such as the PBIS, which is Positive Behavioral Intervention System.
And every school has a version
every school
of that.
has a variation of that. So in the tape you may see some posters and signs around East that would say hallway behavior, and it would spell out the acronym we use is GPS because we're the explorers, and each building has a different model that fits their school, but it goes at what kind of expectations you have about how kids are in the hallway, how they are at recess, how we expect bus behavior, and the classroom teachers reinforce that through. Most of the teachers have been trained in a program called Responsive Classroom that has morning meeting. So again, you're setting an expectation for the kids about how we treat each other and how we respond in the classroom. And that's the basis of a lot of the beginning work that we do. So when we're talking about Tier 1, that's kind of reaches about 85% of the kids. If you set clear expectations and it's followed, it sets a tone for the building and it calms a building and sets the atmosphere that you want. And then you'll see that there's some specific lessons that some teachers taught, some were taught by the counselors, part of the social curriculum. Also, sometimes we might go in if there's a particular situation in a grade or in a classroom and do a social circle and talk with the kids about what kinds of issues are coming up. So that all fits into that Tier 1, and we have some filming of that. And then I think we also want to talk about some of the small groups and things that we might have filmed.
Yes, some of the Tier 2 interventions for kids who need more targeted skills are small groups that we all run in the building at different grade levels to address different issues. A lot of it is around social skills and building relationships and being able to manage emotions, so emotional regulation, so that they can stay focused and learn really throughout the day. And those groups happen, like I said, by grade level. They're more targeted for kids who maybe need to bolster their skills a little more, where that first tier isn't quite enough. They just need a little more targeted intervention. We use the social thinking curriculum a lot, and also the steps to respect and second step curriculum that all the kids get throughout the system. We can use that in a more targeted way in the small groups, those same concepts, and build on them, do a lot of role playing, and really give the kids a chance to internalize more of the strategies in the second tier.
The curriculum, such as the lessons that come from steps to respect and second step, that of course has changed over the years. And during the time when we had only 2 adjustment counselors in the 4 schools, some of the teaching of that was more spread out. So are the adjustment counselors now doing all the teaching, or is still some of it the classroom teacher's role to do the instruction? How does
Some
that
of it the
work
classroom
now?
teachers are doing. So for instance, the second step lessons are fairly straightforward and can be integrated into the morning meeting that all the teachers do. So we might go to some of those lessons so that we have an opportunity to get to know all the kids, but it's something that a classroom teacher can continue on. And the steps to respect lessons, which is the bullying prevention program, in 4th grade is more elaborate curriculum, and those ones we teach specifically.
Yeah.
You mentioned the responsive classroom, and that most of our people have been trained in. In fact, that really is becoming one of the first things that we try to get new teachers to Hingham involved in. Many come to us having already had that training, but that's a wonderful program, and we offer summer training every year at 2 levels usually. So
it's a terrific program. I actually took the training just so that I'd have a better sense of how the teachers do it. And it really provides the welcome to the students as soon as they come in. There's usually a morning message. They have different activities to do so that they learn to be part of a community. They learn how to share information about themselves. In the taping, you'll see, it's hard to see because we don't have the sound on it, but you can see the kids are learning to just basic skills to be able to turn and look at somebody in the eyes and shake hands or make a greeting, make sure that everybody is greeted as they come in, that they're welcome to the building. And that kind of an atmosphere then sets up the basis of being able to then get to the academic subjects that you can't get to if the class isn't feeling settled.
And I think having observed some of the training in particular, as well as having been in a few classrooms where I see it happening, it also gives kind of a common language that kids take from one grade level to the next, and so really establishes a foundation at the early grade levels.
Yeah, and community-wide. I mean, you know, that's what, so when they start getting it in kindergarten, it just filters all the way up through the 5th grade, and then as they get older in the older grades, it can become, you know, more abstract thinking. You can work on skills in a deeper way, but that foundation has already been laid, which is great.
And speaking of kindergarten, it's a good time to put in a plug or an announcement that you know, we're moving forward with our full day kindergarten program for next year. And obviously, one of the big motivators for extending that day, it's not just about academics, it's about the social kind of learning and thinking and support and all of those things that we've been rushing kids through and not doing as much of. And so we're excited about that. And so actually last night the school committee voted that on the funding plan for the coming year, which will be mainly around parent tuitions with a scale so that there's some access for people who would struggle financially, but we're really excited that we're now on the way. The other thing, kind of related to that topic, is that just 2 days ago a report came out from the Rennie Center. I don't know if you're familiar with the Rennie Center, but they in this part of the country are the center that does educational research and writes policy kinds of things about what's good education. And they do these periodic reports where they have 2 or 3 topics that will be the action plan for the future, the immediate future. So the report just came out 2 days ago, and we're in the midst of budget where we're talking about things that we need, particularly the kindergarten. And we're also saying in the budget that so many of our resources now have to go to providing support for children and families that perhaps wasn't true some time ago. Anyway, this report, so the 3 action topics this year, and Heather will be able to relate to all of them because one of them relates to post-secondary planning. But the 2 that made me feel good, that good in the sense that we're not different in the issues that we have. Everybody has these because they've picked up on them. But also that these are reports that say to the public, you know what, it isn't all about academics. And so the 3 topics that they had were early childhood education and access for all. And they were really talking about preschool access. So I think they're assuming that because 88% of the students in this Commonwealth are already in full day, that everybody had that, but kind of a boost for us about the importance of early childhood. The second one is about support. Children needing support in this whole area of social learning and social emotional growth and development. And so that was nice to see. And of course we had budget requests in both of those areas. And the third one really is about providing more students with avenues for access to higher education. And that's a kind of thing that we're doing anyway through the counseling at the high school. So that was an interesting report. So we've talked about what happens at Tier 1 and Tier 2.
Yeah.
What about Tier 3?
Tier 3, you know, we weren't able to do any taping
Sure.
for because obviously there are concerns about confidentiality. But we are seeing a increase in stresses in the community, you know, and reaching from, unfortunately, we even at the elementary had a number of parents die and students dealing with that. Significant illness among the kids, and as well as you know, some things, no matter what the socioeconomic state of the community is, there are still issues of stresses in families. We've had to file reports with DCF if we're worried about the safety of a child, and that has come up pretty not often, but you know, when it does,
More
it's
than
something
one
that
would think.
Right.
more than, I think
town.
more than one would
Yes.
think. You know, as a town resident, you know, people will often say, "Oh, that must be a very cushy job," and I think that, you know, when you have a community as respected as Hingham, people don't necessarily know that there are many families who are struggling a great deal.
And I'm glad you made the point
so-
about it's not socioeconomically based.
And it's not socioeconomically based. Families have difficulty, go through stressors, you know, breakups in marriages, and we are coming off a very bad economy, so a lot of people are worried about a whole number of issues. And we are seeing kids with some very significant impairments that are in the classrooms, and so you're trying to strike a balance of meeting their needs and also being aware of the needs of the whole class. So sometimes our presence is one in which we may be able to work with a child for a little bit and help that child to be more successful and have less disruption in the regular classroom.
And you mentioned DCF. We also are fortunate in Hingham to have 3 police resource officers, and they
That's
can
been a
provide a
wonderful
different
resource.
kind of support and intervention and perhaps some guidance and in some cases a stronger view that we may need in some families with situations with families and with children. So we really are fortunate among public schools in our area, at least, to have some good support in addition to the things that you do. I would think that you would work as well closely with the nurses
Yes.
in the
Yeah.
schools.
We do.
We definitely are fortunate to have really strong teams at each of the schools. So we have a nurse, we've got the principals and now the full-time assistant principals and us to work together for the different kids who may enter through a medical issue or may enter through behavioral disruption and go to the assistant principal, but yet come to us in terms of an underlying worry for that child or for that family that we're trying to help.
And I think we're really great at collaboration and consultation, and a lot of what the adjustment counselors do, especially at the elementary level, where they may be supporting teachers in the classroom because they're with the kids for the most time. So doing a lot of consultation around what interventions and what strategies can help the student, because really our role is to support the student so that they can access their learning. If they're so anxious that they can't do that and they can't focus on the classroom, that not only distracts them from their own learning, but may distract others in the classroom from learning. So I think a lot of what the adjustment counselors do, especially at the elementary level, is consultation with other staff members to help them and the direct support of the student.
Yeah, so other staff members and also outside providers. I mean,
Oh, good
kids
point,
have
yeah.
other people in their lives that are helping to support them. Families have other people. So we do a lot to try and keep the communication open, and so that there's, the loop is closed, and that everybody's really working together to support the family in kind of a more holistic way.
We were just talking the other night, as we were again talking about budget at one point, about the fact that if you just look at special education as a different kind of support, but when special education services first came along and when the laws were first written, it was all about disabilities, children with disabilities, and most disabilities are pretty obvious. If a child has a physical disability, if a child has limitations in terms of being able to verbalize or be mobile, those kinds of things are very obvious. But more and more, and I think probably as a result of hearing officer decisions, the scope of services has changed. And so now the language is not about disability, but about access to learning.
Yeah.
And so the kinds of things we're talking about today, stresses in children's lives, children with anxiety and so on, all of that comes under that bigger umbrella now because it limits the child's access to learning.
That's right, yeah.
And I think that also is the piece where, so even if a child is anxious and has an outside therapist, that may or may not have an immediate impact in how they behave in a classroom.
Right.
And so that's where our consultation with the teachers and with the team to help a child to settle in and have resources within the classroom can help settle down some of the situation more quickly than might be true of a therapy-only approach.
So is there anything else in the taping that you might want to point out that people to look at?
I think people should be impressed with what a wonderful staff we have.
Yeah.
I would agree.
And it is
about that.
amazing when you see, starting with preschool, the kinds of skills that they're learning, and as you were pointing out, it's not only academic skills, but they're, how do you get up? How do you show through your body, what they call whole body listening? How do you show that you're paying attention to somebody and responding to them? So they do that, and then you move through developmentally in each of the classrooms till the 5th grade is up and they've got they're writing their own comments and learning presentation skills. But about in one of the filming, it was about essentially a recess issue. How do you play football? What if you're not the one who's picked all the time? What if you're the one who was picked? And how do they make it so that it's fair? So each developmental issue, they are learning a whole array of skills in addition to solving that particular problem.
It's interesting you mentioned whole body listening because Ellen Keene, who's our assistant superintendent, and I read all of the observations that come from the department heads and the principals. They come to our office to go in the file, and we read every single one, and in a way that's kind of our window on what's happening day to day in the classroom. And so the first time I saw that phrase, whole body listening, I thought, oh, that must be something unique to this individual teacher. Well, then I began seeing it more and more, and I realized, okay, this is actually part of what we're trying to. And that's what I was referring to earlier when I talked about the fact that common language and so on, that teachers use a common language and everybody kind of knows what that means. And if it begins in kindergarten or first grade, then it only needs to be a phrase and not stop doing whatever, and it's a more positive kind of phrase.
Right.
As
And that one's an interesting one because that social learning came as a program through Michelle Garcia Winner, and she started working with autistic children and developed a lot of materials about how to help them to learn social cueing and social. So initially, you have our speech and language people working on those skills, then they're bringing it into the classroom. But then what they found out is actually the entire classroom benefited from learning some of those skills, and it helped to not stigmatize the children. Actually, they felt like they were the stars because they already knew this language, and it was helpful for the other kids to learn some of it also. So, we're constantly learning and evolving each program that helps the kids to.
Great. Well, I think we're going to take a break, a couple minutes, and then come back with some specific questions for my guests. Welcome back to Superintendent Spotlight. As you're aware from our prior segment, I have 3 guests today who are talking about our social learning and social emotional support system in the Hingham Public Schools. And I have Jessica Hogue, who's a new elementary adjustment counselor this year, Catherine Ryan, who's a very experienced adjustment counselor in elementary schools, and Heather Rodriguez, who is the director of counseling for our schools. And so I'm going to start with you, Jessica, with some specific questions. Now, you're new to Hingham, so obviously you've worked somewhere else. And we talked in the other segment about the prevalence of stress in children's lives and anxiety and all the kinds of things that you wouldn't think should be happening with young children, but do. So given that you've worked in other settings, are there certain things that seem to be a common across the society in 2015, things that impact kids' access to learning?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that there's a couple things that are definitely
And as opposed to things that might be unique because of the demographic of our community and others like us, I think is.
Yeah. I mean, I think anxiety is the big one. Running across all communities, that there seems to be a higher level of anxiety for children. I think we have always seen some anxiety, especially in the upper grades, but we're seeing it at a much higher level in the elementary school even. And I've seen that in every community that I've worked in, that the kids are really struggling with the stress level, managing their emotions and their anxiety and their worry around a whole variety of issues. Academics, the busyness of their lives and being able to feel like they need to achieve in every arena. And I think that happens a lot also in towns with high socioeconomics. There's a lot of pressure to do well in everything and to be involved in a lot of things because people have the resources to do that. And that can really raise anxiety for families and kids when they're constantly rushing. They're not able to sit and connect with one another or always on the move. I think that's one factor in the anxiety level that we see. But I would say anxiety is a big one. And also, the social skill piece. I think we're seeing kids come in struggling, more children struggling with their social development than we have in the past. And again, I think that's, pretty universal in most communities. And I think that, why it's hard to say exactly why, I think, again, part of that is kids have less free time, less time to play in an unstructured way. And that's how all those social skills and develop, and all that problem solving develops is through that free unstructured play, and I think there's less of that in kids' lives, and we're kind of seeing the deficit of that. Also, there's the technology, which is related to anxiety, and I think our social skills. The anxiety piece, there's really no escape for kids socially. They're on all the time, and it used to be you could go home and kind of take a deep breath and not have to worry about all that social stuff, and kids are being hit with it everywhere they turn now, and they're up at night looking at different websites, and there's just a lot of access, and we know that the bullying is becoming, goes to another level now that it's can be anonymous, it can be spread so quickly. There's no way to turn it off in the way that there used to be. You could just go home and have your safe zone, and that doesn't exist anymore. So I think that complicates things.
And in my world, I often get questions such as budget time and other, or in other forums where we're dealing with adults who don't have a lot of experience with what's happening in school today. And this question about, well, why should we have to be providing these services? And it is important that we know something about the why. Perhaps we can do something about preventing or mitigating some of those circumstances. But the reality is those kids show up at our doors every day, and that's the why for me, is to provide support for them so they can move forward. So.
Yeah, and we're seeing, we see kids that have trouble just coming into the building because they're so anxious. And, we really, if we don't intervene and help that child move through their day, you could end up with a child who ends up being truant and eventually drops out of school. So it's really important that we have the support for families, and parents need the support. They don't know what to do and how to guide their child, and that's really what we're there for. We're there for the parents, the children, the teachers, to all support that child in whatever barriers there might be for them to be in school, feel comfortable in school, and access the curriculum in the way that they know that we know they have the potential to.
Great, thank you. Heather, we talked in the other segment a lot about what's happening at the elementary school because we have two elementary experts here. But we do have, and you mentioned at the beginning, this is the 3-tier system, and it does include the middle school and the high school, but it seems to me there are differences in the role of an adjustment counselor at all 3 of the levels. So could you speak a little bit more to what is happening at the high school and the middle school on a day-to-day basis?
Sure. Just structure-wise, the high school and the middle school have school counselors, whereas the adjustment counselors are the only counseling staff besides school psychologists, which are dealing with special education at the elementary level. So they kind of function as the school counselor as well as the adjustment counselor. They're the one-stop shop for everything, where we have the benefit at the middle and high school levels of having school counselors and having an adjustment counselor as well. So the adjustment counselor is there for every single student in the building. They are regular education staff members at all levels. And so they are there to help support the kids to access their learning. So that looks a little bit different at the middle and high school levels. The students at the middle and high school levels can participate a little bit more in telling us what their problems are, explaining, what they may be struggling with. And so it's a little more less consultation with staff members, well, that is important, but a little more direct work and
With
direct
kids.
services with the kids. So the middle school, there may be social skills groups and lunch groups and things like that going on with the adjustment counselor to kind of help those kids navigate those issues, and at the high school it is a little more one-on-one with the student.
Right, okay, thanks. So Catherine, the 3 of you, I think, have described well the 3-tier system. And so that's sort of one way of looking at a curriculum. It strikes me that at each of those tiers there is both a proactive kind of component and a reactive kind of component. So if you think of slicing your day that way, proactive and reactive, over the course of a week or so, what percentage of the time do you spend in each camp?
I think various times we've tracked kind of how we use our time to get a better sense of that, and it more or less comes down to about half of the time is direct service with kids that may be scheduled or as needed, and then a quarter of the time is doing the prevention programs like Second Step, Steps to Respect, classroom lessons. And then another quarter is consultation with parents, outside therapists, doing training programs for staff, that kind of consultation. So that's more or less the breakdown.
Right.
And in terms of the proactive, so at least a quarter of it is the kind of prevention programs. And we try to get more and more of that in and to review what kinds of issues are we seeing. Like Jessica was mentioning the kids being online now, so we're reviewing how do we start, even while we're saying kids in elementary school should not have smartphones and should not be doing this, but knowing that they are, how do we start dealing with it so it doesn't interfere with the schooling?
I was reading an article, perhaps even written by a Hingham young person, talking about the stress and the life of high school students, and it is a stressful life, and worrying about college, and worrying about getting good grades, and worrying about being socially with it, and all those things are important. But in this particular thing that I read, it was that so there's really no time to be me, and no time to relax and unwind. And then I, subsequent to that, read an article that talked about teenagers spending 4 hours a day, screen time on something. Apart from homework, this particular research study had said, I don't know how true that is or not, but that wasn't kind of mentioned in the whole stress thing, because for many kids, they would look at that as their
Relaxation.
social time, their relaxation time, and in fact, they're probably wanting more of that time as a relief from the stress. But everyone, of course, has their own perspectives about what causes what. So Catherine, I'm going to stick with you. Certainly, bullying has been a big issue, and it's an important topic, and some terrible things have happened to young folks as a result of bullying. So we have laws now, very specific laws about training staff, and dealing swiftly and promptly with issues that are related to bullying. And there are in that law, there are definitions as to what bullying is. And I struggle with, as I'm sure you do in the buildings, and I know principals do as well, to help people have a better understanding about relationship issues. Our relationship issues, and they're not always bullying. Now, that's not to say that bullying doesn't go on. It absolutely does in our community as well as anywhere else. But how can we get a better idea of across to parents in particular that not everything that happens is bullying. Sometimes it's unkind behavior. That needs to be dealt with, perhaps not in the same way that you would deal with bullying. So talk to me about, is that an issue in trying to get parents and kids to understand that there's a kind of a line between we're learning to get along better with one another and this is just wrong behavior?
I think that the first point that you made, which is that we're going to deal with it either way, is an important one, because I think that the bullying does have specific legal guidelines in terms of how it's investigated, how it's addressed, how you respond to parents. And I think sometimes parents can feel frustrated if they understand it as meanness, and meanness equals bullying, and then we say, well, we investigated and did not find it to be bullying. And I think their feeling is that we're then saying it's not serious.
Exactly.
And I think
or that we're going to ignore it.
Or that we're going to ignore it. And I think what we try to teach the kids is that there are two ways of being mean. Okay, so one, and we have to address either one of them. One is you and I are equals, and I come in and I insult you. And then you insult me back, and we're going at it back and forth. And I go home and I say, that Jessica's the worst person. She was mean to me all day. And to a parent, that may feel like bullying. To us, that feels like a conflict because it's an equal power situation. The bullying is specifically meant for issues where there's a power differential and it is repeated and it's targeted to someone. So, for instance, I'm the most popular person in the grade. I know Jessica is new to the school and I don't want her becoming popular, so I think I'm going to tell everybody behind her back don't hang out with her. I heard she was the worst kid in her old school. So I'm doing that specifically to make her feel worse and up my standing. And if she is already a kid who's vulnerable and on the edge, like we know that more bullying occurs for disabled kids, kids who have lower status in some fashion, then that becomes a bullying issue. And the important part for us in terms of how we deal with it is that if it's that kind of power differential, you wouldn't put the two people together and say, now tell him why she's being mean to you, because that person doesn't feel like they have the power to be honest and to share with you. Whereas if we're friends and we go through a patch, which my spring is filled with 4th grade and 5th grade girls who have just had falling outs and they now think the other person's the worst person in the world. In those situations, you'd bring the two of us together and say, now you guys used to be friends. What's going on? What changed? You'd want to work on the relationship. So I think that in both cases, we would work on it, but the approach would be different. And bullying is really the idea being that it's a power differential. And one of the ways I explain to the kids is, you know, if you've got any siblings and you finally see your sibling who's the shining star do something wrong, what's the feeling you have inside? And all the kids will say, I can't wait to tell my parents. And I said, right, that's a conflict. That's tattling, that's not bullying, because you're really excited. When it's real bullying, kids are really anxious to tell. They'll say, don't say anything, I don't want anything to happen, I'm really worried about it. You get much more fear and you have to coax it out of them. When it's a conflict, they're running into the teacher saying, do you know he knocked somebody down at recess? That's not bullying. That's, you know, rough behavior.
Yeah.
So,
And even drama. Drama is different than bullying.
Right.
You
Yes.
see a lot of,
Right.
well, they say girl drama, and that's different than bullying.
Right.
But I think all the social emotional programs that we have at that first tier prevention level are all about, a huge piece is about conflict resolution and how kids can empower themselves. We want kids to learn how to solve their own problems.
Right.
Of course, they can always go to an adult if they need help, and that's always the message. But if they don't have these situations to learn how to you know, either make a mistake themselves and do something mean and learn how that comes back on them and how it makes somebody else feel and recognize that, or be able to stand up for themselves, then they can't learn those skills. So while we never want to see kids being mean to each other, and we always, the whole community base is about respect and kindness, even if it's not your friend, you are kind to that person. Kids make mistakes, they do things they shouldn't, and then it's an opportunity to learn. And I think when it's a conflict, that's really, you know, what the focus is teaching. When it's bullying, it's a
It
totally
just needs to stop.
It
Right,
just needs to
exactly.
stop, and it's like Catherine said, you have to treat it in a different way because there is someone who is an aggressor and someone is a victim. So it's a different situation with the power dynamic.
You know, Heather mentioned in her opening comments that the adjustment counselor in the social learning program is considered as a regular ed function, and some of that is just budgetarily that all of you are paid in the regular education part of the budget. So that distinction isn't such an important one. But I think sometimes when we say it's a regular education function, then you have parents of children with special needs saying, well wait a minute, doesn't my child have access to this as well? And so, you know, how can we help folks to understand that most of our children with special needs in the Hingham Public Schools are in regular classrooms, so they're regular ed students as well. They just have some needs of one sort or another, learning needs of support or access that that we need to provide more support for. So how can we work with parents of children with special needs not to feel that children are excluded, and on the other hand, parents of children in the regular ed program who may feel that, oh, the adjustment counselor, you know, what adjustment suggests there's something wrong with my child. So how can we clarify to parents what the two groups have in common in terms of your programs?
Well, I think just the fact that we are general ed is a huge piece, right? We are, any child, any family in our building can access us. and has the right to access us. Any parent who wants to call me can call me, any of the adjustment counselors, and say, you know, whatever they want to ask, that we are available to everybody. And I think that's just an important reminder. I do think there's a misconception on both ends, that parents don't realize that we are general ed and that we are available to anybody. And that's really important for us to get that message out there that, you know, there are so many things that we can do to support families, whether it's just a phone call or consultation, or if families need outside resources, or if they need more intensive work, that we can look at all those different things and we're available to them for that. And the flip side, that we are general ed, which means special ed kids do have access to our services as well. My groups are made up of both, a mixture of both. And I think it's just really important for people to realize that we're there for the entire school population.
And I think that one of the things that sometimes people can think is that because we're trained therapists, that we should be doing therapy with a small population. And you know, I've had a private practice, I know what that is, but that's really not the intent of the role. Right. It's not to have a private practice within a school. It's not to see a small number of students. First of all, that would be isolating them, and by 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, they know you're a counselor, and it can get problematic if they think that you only see kids with very high needs. So that's one issue. And the other issue is fairness to the town, that people should be referred to community resources for therapy that's ongoing, that can include their family, that may have private issues that they may not choose to share with the school, and appropriately so. Whereas our role is to figure out in the school day, how do we help these kids to be successful? And that may be through an intervention with the teacher, it may be by seeing the student, and both the special ed students and the regular ed students will get that, but not especially more.
And would you say that that would be a tier 3, the tier 3 piece of, and the students you serve in that are the ones that perhaps are getting or needing some outside kinds of services?
I don't think it's necessarily special ed students. There are certainly some who might need more intensive
No, I wasn't
work.
saying special ed, but just the kids that need more interventions.
Yes, sometimes. Sometimes it's the tier 3 might be a short-term crisis in the family. And, and so they may need that kind of work. But the more ongoing, they might be people who are seen both in the community and would have check-ins with us to make sure that there's communication between what we're seeing in the school and what they're seeing in their offices.
So we now have the adjustment counselors back in each one of the schools, and for 5 years since the opening of East. So you were split between 2 schools, and now you're full-time in 1 school. And before we lost staffing in that department, you were full-time. So we really have 2 parts to this question. One is, so what are the things that you're able to do now that you couldn't do when it was a shared role? And is the role now that you're back full-time in one building the same role it was 5 years ago when you were full-time in one building?
That's a good question. First of all, I'm incredibly grateful to the town for valuing this and for increasing the role, because I think sometimes it's a need that can be invisible, and so people don't want to think we have those level of difficulties, and so I really appreciate the school committee's vision in reinstating it. It makes a tremendous difference. It makes a tremendous difference not only in what you specifically can do, but in the fact that people can count on you. If families and teachers and kids know that you're there every day, they then can call upon you as a resource. After a while, I was at South full-time for many years before this. And I felt like I had a pretty good sense of who all the students were in the school. Not that I would work with all of them, but I had a sense of who was struggling, who was in the building. After 5 years of running back and forth with one day on in one school and one day on in another school, you no longer had that feeling. So then you're only dealing with the kids who've already been identified. So you lose something with that. You're dealing more with emergencies. And then, like Jessica was saying, a kid who's school avoidance, so I come up with a plan for what to do with them that day. but I'm not going to be there the next day. That makes it very hard to get that kind of continuity. So even though it feels like you're saving money, in the long run, there are things that I can do now in terms of being able to assure a family that there will be a plan for them and that there's that continuity that I couldn't honestly say was in place before that.
Right.
And in terms of how it's changed over time, it's just amazing how, I mean, I guess that's the fun part of working with kids. And in a community, the whole community changes. And so, you know, you have to respond to the different issues as they are now. I think that, for instance, now we're going to have a speaker. We're putting some effort into getting community speakers so that parents get more information. So we're having Elizabeth Englander come in to talk about bullying. We're setting up a program for parents with Bob Bigelow and Margaret Conity, who's our athletic director, just talking about the role of sports and for kids, because it's both a wonderful thing, but also sometimes parents feel pressure about, is this going to get my child into college? What does it mean? Can we stay with something? So, you know, how do you get a balance so that you can respond? And I think that the more that we're in the buildings and have that feeling for what are the stressors that are going on right now, we can respond more efficiently and quickly.
And also giving you a more focused attention to a smaller number of families.
Absolutely.
It's kind of the same issue we're talking about, what's being one of the advantages of moving forward with full-day kindergarten. The
Yes.
kindergarten teachers now have to relate to, 40 families,
Right.
and then it will be 20. And
That's
that will
right.
make a great deal of difference in terms of the personalization of relationships.
Yeah.
That's right. Between South and East in the past, there was almost 1,200
Yeah,
kids.
and because of our two
And,
biggest
you know, you
schools.
can't really do much more than
Right.
the kind of
Put
headline
Band-Aids on.
issues.
Yeah, it gets reactionary
Right.
more than,
Speaking of Band-Aid issues, as I talk to parents, or parents sometimes talk to me, it's kind of, that often is a different, for a different reason. But it seems that when there are concerns about, particularly about student behavior and relationship issues and so on, often it's about what happens on the bus, what happens on the playground. And of course we deal with both of those on a day-to-day basis, and elementary assistant principals and principals get involved as well. But I am aware that I think it's fair to say that each of our elementary schools has taken on some projects recently to try to lower the temperature on the playground, either by providing different kinds of activities that kids can participate in, or training for our staff to be watchful for things. So can you give us some examples of what you're aware of that goes on in terms of the whole playground issue, or the problem, potential on the playground for issues?
So, I mean, at Foster, and I think this is true at all the elementary schools, well, first it starts with the PBIS. So having that, setting those.
Can you tell us what PBIS is for the
Positive behavioral intervention, what's the S?
System.
System.
With supports.
So it's really setting the expectations community-wide and making sure that those expectations are clear for the kids.
And for all
the
of
staff.
the adults
And
and the staff.
for all
'cause
the adults.
That's been an issue
Yeah,
sometimes.
so the support staff that's out on the playground and in the lunchrooms, that they are also trained in how to deal with issues when they come up. So the expectations are posted, the kids know what the expectations are, the grown-ups know what the expectations are, and that those are reinforced throughout the day. And a lot of it, is in a positive way, pointing out when kids are doing things correctly, because if you point out the correct behavior, then it tends to get modeled. So, and that's part of the responsive classroom theory too, is to make it, point out the positive behaviors, and the kids will fall into line. So there's a lot of that goes on a daily basis. That's how we structure our community. In terms of how we structure their time, it should be unstructured time. Like I said, that's how the kids learn and interact and have that cooperative play and build those skills. But there is supervision in that, so that if kids are struggling or need some help with conflict resolution, the staff is there to help them with those things. At Foster, we've structured a lot of the games. We've laid out the rules for the games and structured the play in a way so that the expectations are really clear for each exact game. In other words, if they're playing soccer, it should be 4x4, so the groups are smaller. And that gives kids more of an opportunity in a smaller group to be able to use those skills. The bigger the group, the harder it is for them to manage when they're younger.
And providing some different activities
Right.
that,
Yes.
that aren't all sports and
Yes.
competitive.
That-
And that
the
was
board
part of an
has-
initiative,
Yeah.
you know, before we got
yes,
here,
we-
that
through a
we
grant,
worked
I
with
think, with the
a
Hingham Ed
grant
Foundation.
and in collaboration with the phys ed teachers. We had staff training at several of the schools and teaching the kids different games. Because it is very hard if you are in a competitive soccer team or a competitive football team and you go out to recess, you're going to play by your
Right.
competitive rules. So the idea was to break into smaller groups and
Yeah.
to try some games that are less competitive
Yeah.
and give more children the opportunity for access.
Yeah, and kids can sign board games out, so it doesn't all have to be athletic based. There can be a range of activities for kids.
You know, over the years, we certainly had crises that occur in each of our schools, sad events, whether it be something like the death of a student, sadly, or a faculty member, or some other terrible crisis that has either occurred in our community or in the community at large that kids could be upset about. So tell me the kinds of ways that we organize to be able to respond to things like that.
Right. Unfortunately, we have had to deal with some of that, and we always try to be prepared and be proactive so that each school and the district as a whole has crisis plans in place. So for every imaginable situation, we have a protocol. We know who is on the team. We know that we will call everyone and kind of explain what's going on, who's on the crisis team, and then decide to have a specific plan going forward on how to manage that.
Which could be within the building, or
It could be within the building.
broader.
It could be in a few different buildings depending on what the incident is. We are very fortunate that we do have such a strong counseling staff that if in the past when we have had incidents, we've had, for instance, we had the death of a high school student a few years ago. The counselors throughout the district came up to the high school and helped us process with the kids, process
And the
with their
parents, I can recall.
Exactly. And so we're available on Saturdays. You know, whenever the incident occurs, we kind of rally around and have this strong support to come support all of the different factors that we have, the different groups.
And regionally, I'm aware that, you know, we often get calls from other communities who say, if you need something, we can come help. You probably get
Absolutely.
those calls too. Can you come and help us? So it's nice to know there are those supports. So-
Right.
Well, this has been very enlightening to me. I've learned a lot, and I'm sure the people watching at home have learned a lot as well. And I want to thank you all for coming, not just for today, but for the taping and the organizing of this segment. I'm proud of all of you, and I'm proud of what we do in our district. So thank you all very much.
Great.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
And thank you all for watching.